Hi everyone, just wanted to do a quick video on cutting board maintenance. I am finishing up a batch of my cutting board wax and figured now would be a good time to just talk about how I take care of my cutting boards and how I prepare mine for sale as well. So as you use your cutting board over time, it will dry out and you will need to rehydrate it. Most people do use mineral oil. You can usually find it online on Amazon. I buy it by the gallon. You can also buy it in smaller sizes too. It is sold in some stores as like cutting or butcher block or cutting board oil. Generally, it's much more expensive. If you want it locally, I generally recommend going to like a drugstore because it's also sold as a laxative. So, don't drink it if you don't want to have that, but it's perfectly safe for cutting boards. And that's what most people use. You can also use like a drying oil. So another option is like pure tongue oil, or it's called Danish oil, but it's actually polymerized linseed oil from Tried and True. That's another option. If you are doing that, you just want to make sure that you are getting a product that is pure. A lot of products that are labeled linseed oil or Danish oil or even tongue oil are actually blends that have other metallic dryers and bad stuff in them that you don't want on your cutting board. So if you are going to go that route, you do need to get one of the pure products. So when using any of these oils, I always like to wear gloves. They will stain clothes, so you do need to be careful about what you're using with them, as it will soak into clothing or certain countertop materials. And that's another use of mineral oil as well, as some stones like soapstone, they also use mineral oil too to keep it hydrated. So what I like to do is just get some cheap towels and just cover the work surface. Some people like to soak their boards overnight, but I prefer not to. When you soak a board overnight, you are going to end up with stuff leaching out of it over time. And again, mineral oil leaching out is not the best. So I prefer to just lay down some used cloths or new ones, whatever you have that's cheap and accessible. And then I like to do a flood coat of the mineral oil. So this is a little bit of a thinner one. Some are thicker, some are thinner. I generally like to start with a thinner one on a board that is super dry because it will soak in more. And I'll just move it around my fingers. You can also use any sort of cloth or rag that doesn't have any lint to it. So I'll use blue shop towels. You can also use microfiber or anything else really. And essentially, of course, this is a new board, so I'm really going to let this soak in here. But I like to coat the entire side of the board and then let it sit for a good 30 minutes to at least an hour. If your board is more hydrated, you can also shorten this just because you are not going to be putting as much oil on the board. But I like to let it sit on there for a while and just soak it as much as possible and keep moving it around. Again, some people do prefer to soak it overnight or for a longer time and put it in a drying rack. But it is a little more effort for just one or two boards. So that's why I like to just do this, because you aren't using and wasting quite as much oil. And it is just kind of nice to, leave it on the surface like that. So I'll let that sit for a while, just soak in, and then I will come back. I have another one I'm doing too. These are just some sample boards I made for customers, so they're not perfect, but I just needed to kind of show off what's going on. And if you are doing like an open grain wood like walnut like this is, it very well may suck up more oil, so you might have to reapply oil within the 30 minutes to an hour. Again, it really depends on the wood, how dry it is. It also depends on your humidity too, because the drier it is outside, the more oil that it will soak up. And you really do get to see that grain pop after you put that oil on, which is always a nice little thing. So letting that oil soak down in there, and then getting all the edges real good. You can see why I wear gloves. Granted, you can always just wash it off, but it is, being oil, kind of hard to wash off your hands, so that's why I prefer the gloves, just to make my life a little bit easier and I'm not getting mineral oil everywhere. You can wash it out of clothes in that too. It isn't, a permanent thing. I found that when I had towels that I used for this that I washed in the washing machine, it took a couple washes to really get all that mineral oil that was trapped in there out. And the end grain also soaks up a lot more oil too. After you let the oil sit for a couple of hours and it's really soaked in, you can go ahead and wipe off the excess. So I'll just use, again, I usually use blue shop towels, but any high quality towel will work. You just want to be sure that whatever you use just doesn't have a lot of lint to it, because lint can get stuck in the grains of the cutting board, and that can be a nuisance for you to deal with. So one more step. So you can stop at this stage. Perfectly able to use it now. I mean, it's mineral oil. It doesn't go bad. And that's one of the main things you want to make sure you don't use, like a plant oil that doesn't dry, because if you use like vegetable oil, it can go rancid and you could have problems with it. But now that that mineral oil is on there, you're good for a good long while. But one more thing that a lot of people like to do, and I myself am included in that, are to apply a wood wax or a wood butter. Basically, it combines mineral oil with beeswax, and that just gives you a little more protection, a little more sheen. And then if you're cutting on the board as well, you can get a little more life out of it just by filling in some of those smaller abrasions. So this is my own. You can buy it online, or you can get one locally as well. Some are a little bit harder, some are softer. It really depends on what the mineral oil they're using is. But essentially, all you do is take, again, a clean cloth, or a gloved finger if you're so inclined, and don't drop it on the ground, because that's not good. And then, depending on how hard it is, mine's a little on the harder side if you first work it, but then it gets a lot softer as you go. And you kind of just work it into the grain of the wood. So I'll do this. I like mine as well, because I use more of a raw beeswax that's not very processed. So you get more of that beeswax smell that I really enjoy. But you just go ahead and apply that. Some people only do it at the front of the board. I like doing it to both the front and the back. That little bit extra moisture protection can help over time to keep your board from warping. And it's really not much more effort. So I'll just go ahead and wipe a pretty liberal coat all the way around the board. And also making sure to hit all of those edges as well. Get a little more of this. And a little does go a long way. Like one of my tins that I have here will last me, I think on my own boards, I have a tin I've had for like a year. And it doesn't really go bad. So it does last a long, long time. And it is nice to have. Just go ahead, apply that to all your surfaces. Get it rubbed in nicely. And then just like the mineral oil, we're going to go ahead and let this sit. This does have, mine just has mineral oil and beeswax. So again, that mineral oil is going to soak in the board a little more. And you really just want to let that happen. And then wait an hour or two and come back and buff it off. So I will see you back here in about an hour. Alright, so now the wax has had a little bit of time to dry and soak in. So again, I'm going to come back in just with a clean towel and buff it off. So that really just means going around the surface, being pretty aggressive. And if you really put the wax on there, you might need to switch towels a couple times just to keep it going, because you want to try to remove as much excess wax as possible. And then you're also at the same time you are burnishing the wood, and even these paper towels too. I'm not too happy. These do leave a little lint, which not the end of the world if you do leave a little lint. But again, that's just one more thing you have to go back and clean up afterwards, which is why it's good to try to use a lint-free cloth. And speaking of that, I'm going to do that right now. Actually, I'm going to grab one of my extra cloths I have here and use that just because I don't hate myself and want to make my life easier. So yeah, just take that cloth and buff off all that extra wax. And as you buff off the wax, you'll start to notice that the surface will get easier to run it across, because your towel will start gliding across that layer of wax on there, and that really tells you you've got the wax in there good and deep, and you can almost like like no effort. Like, wow, it's, you know, your hand just glides right across it, and that tells you you're getting a nice buildup of wax on there. And also buffing it off nicely as well. So just going around there, and after a minute or two of buffing, it's nice and sleek. And you also get a much more even satin sheen, which I do prefer and I think looks nice, at least on a new board. As soon as you cut into it, you destroy that, but that's part of the life of a cutting board. So hope that video was good for you. Just wanted to show how I take care of my boards and how I process most of my new boards. All right, and I will see you all in the next one.